King William IV, Britain's most revolutionary reign. He was never meant to be king. Born in the shadow of royal brothers and a long-serving monarch, William Henry, the third son of King George III, seemed destined for obscurity. He was a sailor, not a statesman, a man shaped more by salt air and cannon fire than by courtly politics. But in one of history's great ironies, it would be this reluctant monarch who presided over one of the most revolutionary periods in British history. He was known in his youth as the Sailor King, having joined the Royal Navy at just 13. He served in the American Revolutionary War and spent decades aboard warships patrolling the coasts of Europe and the West Indies. William lived among officers and common seamen alike, absorbing the culture of discipline, hierarchy, and hard-earned camaraderie. It gave him a unique perspective among British royals. He saw not only how power was wielded, but how it was endured by those beneath it. William, already in his mid-60s when he took the throne, surprised everyone. Though often portrayed as boorish and tactless, he allowed, and even encouraged, his Whig government to pursue a reform agenda that would forever change Britain. At the heart of this movement was the Reform Act of 1832, a bill that would widen voting rights, redraw parliamentary districts, and weaken the iron grip of aristocratic power. William returned to England in the 1790s as Europe spiraled into chaos. The French Revolution had upended monarchies and fueled republican fire. Napoleon's rise and fall reshaped the continent. Britain, still ruled by aristocrats and dependent on industrial wealth, remained rigid in class but restless in spirit. William, outspoken and sometimes clumsy, began expressing political views uncommon for a prince, supporting moderate reforms, mocking snobbish elitism, and sympathizing with the working class. By the time William was crowned king in 1830, Britain had already begun to crack. His elder brother George IV had left behind a trail of excess and scandal. Parliament was a den of landed elites. Industrial towns like Manchester and Birmingham, teeming with workers, had no political representation. Discontent boiled in cities, fields, and factories. The people were not calling for a new monarch. They were calling for a new system. The king found himself at the center of one of Britain's most tense constitutional crises. The Tories resisted the bill. The Lords blocked it. The people rioted. William, wary of full revolution but committed to order, took a bold step. He threatened to create enough new peers to override the Lords. This act, daring and unprecedented, was enough to break the deadlock. The Reform Act passed. Though he did not author the legislation, William IV became its unlikely champion. He lent the crown's weight to the cause of the people without surrendering it to mob rule. Under his short reign, the seeds of modern British democracy were planted. The balance of power shifted. No longer would the monarchy rule with unchecked authority, but neither would it crumble under pressure. William IV's reign was also marked by social transformation. The abolition of slavery in the British Empire passed during his time on the throne, a victory for human dignity, though hard-fought and long overdue. Education, factory conditions, and poor law reforms followed, signaling a new era where government could be a tool of change, not just tradition. In family life, William was unorthodox. He had 10 illegitimate children with the actress Dorothea Jordan, all of whom he acknowledged and supported, though none could inherit the throne. He later married Adelaide of Saxe-Meiningen, who became a stabilizing and moral force in his court. Their relationship, unpretentious, faithful, and sincere, stood in contrast to his predecessor's decadence. As the 1830s ended, William grew frailer. He died in 1837, after just 7 years on the throne. But those 7 years had shifted Britain's direction. He left behind a new queen, his teenage niece, Victoria, who would carry the reforms of his reign into a new age of empire, industry, and constitutional rule. William IV is often overlooked. Overshadowed by his extravagant brother and legendary niece, he is rarely remembered with grandeur. But in truth, his reign was revolutionary. He stood at the crossroads of monarchy and democracy, of empire and reform, of past and future. And in his quiet way, he helped steer a nation toward the modern world. The Reform Act of 1832 may have defined his reign politically, but William's legacy ran deeper than any single law. It was in how he governed, how he listened, and how he responded to a rapidly changing society that his true impact emerged. Britain in the 1830s was a storm of contradictions: industrial progress alongside urban poverty, imperial confidence shadowed by social unrest. William, though not a visionary, was steady. Though not brilliant, he was bold when it mattered. He embodied the monarchy's capacity to evolve, or at the very least, to endure. Beneath the surface of reform lay a deeper cultural shift. The people were starting to believe that their voices mattered. The great power of William's reign was not in centralizing control, but in relinquishing just enough of it to empower the middle classes, those new industrialists, lawyers, doctors, and merchants who now formed the engine of Britain's future. No longer was the House of Commons simply an aristocratic toy. Representation began to reflect population, and for the first time in centuries, Parliament echoed the pulse of the people. Alongside political restructuring came seismic changes in governance. The Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, a monumental piece of legislation, passed during William's reign. While much of the credit went to campaigners like William Wilberforce and Thomas Clarkson, it was under William IV that the law finally became reality. Nearly 800,000 enslaved people across the British Empire were emancipated. William supported the act, despite aristocratic protests, and its passing marked Britain's first true moral reckoning as a colonial power. But freedom came with complexity. Plantation owners were compensated, not the slaves. Many freed people were forced into apprenticeships, a euphemism for continued servitude. The monarchy, parliament, and public would wrestle with the legacy of slavery for decades to come. Yet in those imperfect steps toward justice, William IV's reign became a bridge between empire and ethics. Domestically, William pushed for moderation in how he exercised royal power. He reduced royal expenditures and downsized courtly extravagance. Unlike his brother George IV, who reveled in pageantry, William preferred simplicity. He abolished certain royal ceremonies and was known to walk through London with minimal guards. In an age obsessed with image, William lived plainly, earning both admiration and mockery for his lack of pomp. Queen Adelaide herself became a pillar of the people. Known for her piety, charity, and devotion, she brought a moral compass to the monarchy. In a time of social turmoil, Adelaide's grace helped restore trust in the crown. She visited orphanages, funded hospitals, and quietly supported reforms without seeking attention. Together, she and William modeled a different kind of royal family, more human, less divine. Their personal tragedy, however, loomed quietly. William and Adelaide suffered the loss of all their legitimate children. Each died in infancy. With no direct heir, the crown would pass to William's niece, the teenage Princess Victoria. This transition would become one of the most seamless and significant in British history. In his final year, William's health deteriorated. He had seen his empire grow, his parliament change, and his society awaken. Though often dismissed as coarse or ordinary, his commitment to continuity had allowed Britain to avoid the revolutions that toppled monarchies across Europe. In 1837, William IV died peacefully at Windsor Castle. His reign had lasted only 7 years, but they were among the most consequential of the century. His death ushered in the Victorian Age. And yet, the world Queen Victoria inherited was not the world George III had ruled. It was William, plain, practical, and unpretentious, who had stood at the intersection of monarchy and modernity, and chosen wisely to bend rather than break.